you, Philip. Well, this is a nice day, isn't it?
You're the only bravest man to wear shorts today.
Well, I didn't look at the weather forecast. So, yeah, we're here for a purpose. You've heard from Dominic and Simon, and you'll hear from others what that purpose is. I think you all know what that purpose is. How many of you who are here today were here 2 weeks ago for the People's Climate March? Yeah, quite a few of you. A few more people turned out for that because I guess they think that the climate affects us all and elephants don't. But they've kind of missed the point. It's true that elephants and rhinos are wonderful tourist attractions. So is the Talisker Distillery in Skye, which I visited recently. It's a fascinating place to go, but it doesn't exist for the tourists. It exists to make one of the finest single malts on the planet. And that's the point I want to make to you today. The elephants and rhinos, they're wonderful beings. They're amazing, they're fascinating. They are wonderful in the literal sense of inspiring wonder. You see an elephant, you see a rhino, and you're filled with wonder. And so we don't want a wonderful group of species to be wiped out for profit. But it's not just that they're wonderful. They have a job to do. As some of you know, I talk a lot about the gardeners of the forest. Often I'm talking about primates, about gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans, gibbons. Because they too have a job to do. They prune the trees as they're feeding. They eat the fruit and pass the seed through their bodies, which is then deposited in a nice little packet of fertilizer miles from the parent plant. That's what they do. They are the gardeners of the forest. Well, if primates are the gardeners of the forest, elephants and rhinos, they've been described as the mega gardeners of the forest. They shape the landscape. And so when we were here 2 weeks ago, I was here with an orangutan, and a number of gorillas were here, and people dressed as that. When I say an orangutan, I mean someone dressed as an orangutan. Because we were trying to get a point across the point that wildlife is not just an ornament. It's not a nice thing to go and see. Well, it is a nice thing to go and see on your holidays, but that's not what it's there for, any more than the Talisker Distillery is there for tourists. It's there for a purpose. Now imagine how many people work in distilleries in Scotland, in the many fine single malts that you can buy. And then reduce that workforce by, say, 95%. That would be a crisis. Think of the shortage of single malts. It would be terrible. Right. About 100 years ago, within living memory of the oldest members of our species, there were probably millions of elephants. There is an estimate that before firearms made their way into Africa, there were probably 10 million elephants. And now we've got something like, well, fewer than 500,000. So we've already lost 95% of the workforce that prunes the trees and disperses the seeds and fertilizes the forest. Elephants eat a lot, and that means that they produce a lot of dung. How much dung? One elephant produces roughly a metric ton of dung every week. So 500,000 elephants, that's 500,000 tons of dung. But that's 95% less than it was a century and a half ago. Think about it. The productivity of the forest, the fertility of the soil depends on animals eating vegetation and pooing everywhere. And all the invertebrates that feed on that, and all the microbes that are breaking it down and feeding the trees. And where do the trees come from? Who plants the trees? The elephants. The black rhino, white rhino are grazers. But the fruit-eating rhinos and the elephants and the primates are the ones who spread the seeds, because almost all tropical forest tree species depend on animals to disperse their seeds. Between 75 and 95% of all the tree species in a tropical forest need animals. So we're not saving the forest so the animals have somewhere to live, we're saving the animals so that we have a forest. Which is why this march and the People's Climate March are about the same thing. 3 days ago, WWF released its report saying we've lost, in the past 40 years, that's within my working life as a conservationist, 52% of vertebrate wildlife, birds, mammals, fish, reptiles, declined by more than half. It's a tragedy, not just because the nice animals are disappearing. That is true, it's very, very sad that nice animals are disappearing, but we're destroying the very biosphere, the living film around our planet in which we live and upon which we depend. So saving elephants and rhinos, wonderful though they are, is not just about saving elephants and rhinos. They are the mega gardeners of the forest, and if the health of the planet depends on tropical forests, and the health of the forest depends on elephants and apes and toucans and all the other species that disperse seeds, we have to stop biodiversity loss for our own good, not just for the sake of going to see animals on holiday. Yes, they're tourist attractions, yes, that can help to conserve them, but they're part of the biosphere, and that's what we need to save. So thank you for turning out on a wet, horrible Saturday and making this point to the people in there and the people in Brussels, and especially the people in Beijing, because as Stanley Johnson said at the start of this march, the Chinese authorities at a stroke could solve this problem by closing down the ivory trade. So we must work with China to do that, because otherwise there won't be elephants spreading seeds, fertilizing the forest, producing the trees of tomorrow that we need to store and sequester the carbon that we're still spewing out because we're using fossil fuels. All these issues are interrelated, and your presence here today shows how much people care about this. Thank you again for coming out.